So hello and welcome to the Yuki Hub Crawl 2022. The big four behind my head tells you that we're on the fourth session here today. We have 8 virtual sessions as part of the Hub Crawl, and then much to everyone's delight, I think, when we get to April, we'll be heading out on the road and taking this out to some physical locations around the UK. Already said we're not going to be doing them in London. We're going to get out and about into the regions and take our tour with us. If you want to find more details about the Hub Crawl, please go to yuki.org.uk, where you'll find a list of all of them. Today's theme is finance for growth. Surely nothing can be more important than this. In case you miss any of the details as we go, the video content will be available afterwards. So they are being recorded, the sessions, and we will send you the link afterwards. And also we'll send on some slides to you as well to make sure that you're kept informed of all of those key details and the important speakers today. And we do encourage you to ask questions. If you click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type a question in there. We will endeavour to get to them after individuals have done their speaking slots. And if they don't get time to answer them, they will answer them in text for you. So a good opportunity to pick the brains of some of these important individuals and knowledgeable experts. The Hub Crawl is brought to you in partnership with Barclays, and I'd like to welcome Gavin to join me now. Gavin's from Barclays, and we've been working with Barclays quite a lot over the last couple of years, getting out into the regions, going to their Eagle labs, and spreading the good word about the services that Barclays provide. Gavin, now where are you? There you are. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Sam. Thank you so much for having me back, not only the second time on this Hub Crawl, but also for the previous 2. So luckily, I haven't done anything majorly wrong yet to put you
I don't invite you back. You invite yourself back. That's a different thing.
I forced myself onto them, exactly.
Listen, I'm going to turn my camera off and just hand over to you to welcome everyone. So thank you.
Cheers, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Gavin. I lead business development for the Barclays Games team. So as Sam said, we're here, a lot of us are here today to talk about financing within the games industry. So I guess, there's a multitude of different options, which is lucky for everyone in this industry. So it's also just kind of make sure that we find, or we can help you find the right way forward as a business. So just a quick brief history. So, we've been working, we've had a dedicated games team coming up for 3 years now. And I guess there's kind of 3 pillars that we really want to focus on, make sure that studios and publishers and anyone within the games industry had a team and people to come and talk to who understood the industry, that we can sort of dig a bit further, deeper into the business and see if we can help. Second bit was, as a bank, there's only a certain amount of things we can do, which I'll get onto in a minute. So we wanted to make sure we had a multitude of different options available via sort of our external network. Some of you are nicely on the call today, which is amazing, to kind of bring in different options depending on what your business needs are. So the third sort of one feeds me nicely into what I'm here to talk about today. So I guess I knew at some point, the conversation of finance would come up. So I wanted to make sure we had an option. And having worked in a creative space for quite a number of years at Barclays, I wanted to explore the tax credit piece alongside video games that you can apply for. So not only can we help with introductions to sort of accountants and people like that, or tax specialists who can actually help you with the actual claim itself, we also can help with the actual advancing of that tax credit. So I'll give you a very quick example. Your financial year is January to December. We can look at, say, your spend up to sort of, I don't know, June, for instance. We would require a copy of the interim BFI certificate and an opinion letter from an accountant, which confirms, based on your spend to date, what the qualifying spend is and the expected tax credit, of which we can then advance up to 90%. So I guess, there's 2 reasons why I wanted to do that. It's a little bit more flexible, I guess, as normal bank debt that requires and maybe certain types of securities, like whether it's personal guarantees or charges over property, when you get into things like commercial mortgages, whereas this is very much a more straightforward process. We take a charge over the tax credit, so it means that it's not quite as involved, I would say, as some normal bank debt. Where we tend to come in is sort of in between sort of either funding rounds or sort of your publisher payments. So if you know that there's a bit of a cash dip coming up, that's over the last couple of years, that's where we've been sort of assisting studios out. Obviously the people on the call will go into this further than I will on terms of the other types of investment ways of raising finance. So, going for, say, if you're going for your series, in angel round or series A, series B, it doesn't take 5 minutes. I guess there's an element of process and there's people that can help you with that. Sometimes an advance against a tax credit can really help just see you through those kind of few months where you might just need that cash run before you've got that sort of chunky sort of publisher payment or investor payment coming through. So that's kind of where we come in on that side. Alongside that, we've also, not directly on the finance, but we make sure that we can explore other options. So, foreign exchange is obviously a massive part of the industry, a lot of investment coming in dollars, a lot of spend in sterling. So again, just making sure that the basics are right. Do you have a dollar account? Are you set up on the right kind of tariff to make sure that you're getting the most for your dollars if you're then converting that back to sterling? Another option I'm currently exploring is with our invoice finance partner, so Market Finance. So can we look at payments that are due to you? Again, another way of advancing funds before they're due. And there's also potentially looking at contract financing as well. So again, maybe you're working with a distributor or something like that, and there is sort of a slightly longer payment terms. Maybe that's something we could also advance. So I appreciate cash is the main thing that's going to keep driving the industry forward. So again, we want to make sure we can keep it flowing as much as possible. So as a team, we also do we're doing sort of events in terms of getting people and in the industry in front of some of the key influencers, I guess, within this some of these financial needs. So whether that's sort of publishers or investors. So we're doing a demo day with Yuki. It's our second one. So thank you, Yuki, again for working with us on that. And it's a way of going through a process and potentially getting put in front of some very important people within that world who might then be able to support you with your needs that maybe that's where we can't do. So again, goes back to that second point of who can we put you in touch with within our network who can make that difference. So if you want to know any more details about that, please visit games.barclays, or you can drop me an email afterwards. Appreciate, obviously, I've thrown a lot of a different, a lot at you there. But, so look, we're here to support, we're here to have those wide conversations. Each company is slightly different, needs different needs, and, and we can cater to as much of that as possible. So please do reach out. I'm sure Sam will share my details after the event. And happy to connect with anyone. And if anyone's got any questions also, please put them on the chat and I will endeavour to answer them as well. So thank you very much, Sam, for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Gavin. That's brilliant. And you're absolutely right. I will share your details afterwards. So there's lots of things there. If people have any questions on any of those particular details, do get in touch with Gavin afterwards. And Gavin, you've got we're working together on a lovely little games event soon, aren't we? The Games Day, where indie studios can come and present their work. So I'll make sure we send out details of that as well. So great opportunities for studios to get in front of investors, come and have a chat with some people and just learn good tactics. So
yeah, well, we know it's not been maybe the easiest thing to do, especially in lockdown. We've not been able to get out there to sort of certain events. So I guess it's trying to sort of cut out the bit in between and get people directly in front of some of these people that can hopefully make a difference. So yeah, it's a great program. So please do have a look.
Look forward to seeing you on the road in April as well. That'll be nice.
Definitely. Cheers, matey.
Thank you. As Gavin said, if there are any questions, please just pop them in the Q&A and we will try and deal with them as we go through the event. And the speakers can answer them in the text themselves if we don't get the opportunity to do that. And now I'm going to welcome George to join me. George is going to look at some early stage finance. So George, there we go. Lovely. How are you? How are you keeping? You all good?
I'm very well, Sam. Thank you very much indeed. And today you're going to see how technologically useless I am when I try and show you a few slides.
Yeah, but you know stuff, George. That's the key thing.
Thank you. Okay. Well, let's stick to the knowledgeable stuff.
So if you want to share your screen, I'll just confirm when it's on. I'll turn my camera off. So if you just share your screen, and I will tell you when we're good to go.
Okay. Yep.
Here we go. Yep. Thank you. All over to you then, George. Thank you.
Okay. So basically, we're providers of debt. We started 2.5 years ago. We started with VGTR credits. There are 3 partners and 2 senior advisors who are ex-studio managers. My George Weir, one of the founders, has had 35 years of advising SMEs. He was ex-head of Strathclyde University Incubator. Myself, I ran a 400 million SME fund for 15 years in Eastern Europe and in fact Russia, and it was an award-winning fund, believe it or not. We're looking to deploy about 30 million pounds in the strategy, and we're backed by a Luxembourg hedge fund, which is running about £500 million. We're based in Jersey. So what are we offering? We are offering non-dilutive debt finance. And of that, there are 5 different types. We go into VGTR credits. So if you're halfway through the year and you say, can I borrow against my tax credit? We say yes. We do 100% of the spend that you've done so far. And if you know you a little better and we like the way things are going, we can actually lend against the unspent part of the year. So if you think that you're going to spend, say, £500,000 for the rest of the year, and you can prove that, and we're happy with it, we will advance against that as well. The next thing is grant pre-finance. A lot of you have got grants from Innovate UK and other people. Again, we're very happy to lend you the money against the income that's coming, either on a rolling basis or on a one-off basis, so that you get the money up front. The next thing that we do is FAR VGTR. Once we know you well enough, then what we're happy to do is to say, look, we think this year you're going to have a 300,000 rebate, but next year you're going to have a 500,000 rebate, so we can lend you against both of them this year and next year. But we've got to get to know you a little bit before we do the longer one. And finally, we do project finance in the sense that if you've planned a game and the game is almost about to launch and you're quite confident there's quite a lot of statistics and quite a lot of figures on your projected sales, we can lend against that as well. And then again, we can do sales receivable financing if you're getting money from, if you're getting payments from Steam or Google or whoever, we're happy to advance against these. So these are the basic types of debt. Why is debt a good thing? Well, as you can see from the slide, it says, should I sell equity in my studio or do debt finance? And guess what? If you're putting £250,000 into your studio and the valuation of the studio is 1 million, you're then forking out 25% of the equity. Whereas if you wait for a year, once you've got income and once the value of your studio is gone up to 5 million, for example, then you'll get equity on much better terms. And you'll find that the 60,000 or whatever the interest cost is much, much smaller than the loss of value of about 1.25 million, which would be the case if you'd handed out the equity earlier on. So we're advising to use debt as a way to save out an equity rounds. Basically, the way to look at it is to think about how much cash you need, how much your studio would be worth in a year's time or a year and a half time, how much is it going to cost you, and do you actually have access to equity investors? You know, they're here today, they say that they're going to do stuff, and then they don't quite show up. It takes time to get them in. Let me give you an example. In 2019, in December, we did a 6-month VGTR credit for 240 to a studio that had been going for about a couple of years. 6 months later, they got a grant. They said, would you lend us against the grant? So we gave them money against the Innovate UK grant. 3 months later, the VGTR was repaid. And then they said, could we have money against 2021 and 2022 VGTR? It was about 600,000. And we did that as well. And in the middle of 2021, they said, we're going to launch a game. Would you lend us another 800,000 against it? Which we did. This year, they've just raised equity at 2 times the 2019 valuation. So it means that their net gain is about £800,000. So it's been worth the exercise of going through all this structuring and being able to save themselves the extra money. Very briefly, how do we operate? We love meeting new companies. We're experienced investors. We like SMEs. We work with them for most of our lives. We're a little bit old school. We like to get to know you. We like to get to know our clients and spend some time with you. You need to be a bit close-ish to your first game, or you might have launched your first game and you're looking at doing another one. We don't charge upfront fees. We don't charge early repayment fees. So if you find better money, kick us out. We're happy. We don't take personal guarantees. We probably take some security on the company, but then again, it means that when you're late in repaying, and I think that most people are, and when things don't pan out exactly, we're quite friendly. We're relaxed. We're not going to say we're going to foreclose or send you, aggressive letters. So the idea is the way in which we operate is to try and be like your old-fashioned understanding bank manager, and not like a fintech company which is going to try and foreclose the minute they don't get the money. That's it.
That was short and sweet, George.
Good.
Thank you for that. A couple of things that instantly popped out at me. I mean, I understand the idea why you would take that debt rather than potentially equity in the business, which could go up in the future. But what kind of evidence do companies need to show you in order to secure that debt financing?
If it's a VGTR, we need the usual stuff. We need the accountant's letter. We need the calculation set out exactly how the thing works. I mean, how they've reached their calculation. If they're looking at a few months forward, we need to see their projections. And then we'll take it and give it to our resident tax expert, who will come back and say, yeah, I believe it. I need a little bit more information on the contracts. I might need a little bit more information on subcontractors or outsourced or whatever. So there's that's to be done. Then we need to get an idea how much money has been spent in putting the studio together, and on, is this for real, or is it still very, very early stage? And that's about it, really. And that's how we do the VGTRs. The other stuff, if you're going to launch a game, we need somebody to give an opinion on how reasonable the sales projections are. Are these reasonable or are they ecstatic? And again, we've got somebody who will look at it, will look at similar games, look at the time of the year, when they're launched, how they're launched, all the other things. If you're looking at UK Innovate grants, then it's very simple, show us the contract. And we'll then figure out if we do need, again, we need the cash flow projections. We need an idea of how much money you guys have put into the business yourselves, and then see what we can do about it. The whole thing's quick. I mean, typically the tax stuff we can do in a couple of weeks. If all the information's there, it's a couple of weeks. In the case of the grants, well, if we need to go over it, it might take a month. There's a lot of toing and froing, the IPs, the technology, all the other bits and pieces that might need to be there. But by and large, it's a fast process.
And do you think as a nation we're quite debt averse? Do you think calling it debt financing is that seen as a bit of a negative by some people until they really understand it, or is that just me personally thinking I'm not sure I'd want to go into debt?
You're right. It is, because some people, I mean, the people who really don't have any revenue projections, they're scared, and they're not the kind of people that we would like to persuade to take debt. We do need to see that the people do have revenue, that they can repay it, and that therefore, if they are going to get the money back from the government, that's for real. It's not as dangerous as it sounds. It's not hoped for income, it is contracted income. That is the
Contracted
best.
income, indeed. Yeah. Interesting. That's great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your insights into that and the advantages there, particularly for early stage companies. So I will share your details afterwards. If anyone has any questions to follow up with on George, he'll be delighted to take them from you. I'm speaking on his behalf there. So thank you very much, George. I'm now going to, if you can turn your camera off and your sound off, George, and I will bring Spike forward. Spike from Hero. Hello, Spike.
Hello, everybody. Nice to speak to you. Thanks, George, to follow you.
Well, you started having a conversation with George before the event. I mean, I feel like we covered
George
bits.
Took a few shots, actually, I'm going to be honest. But happy, but you know me, Sam, I'm quite robust, happy to take a few shots.
Water off a duck's back. I'm going to hand over to you now, Spike. Take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Spike. I'm Venture Director at Hero Capital. I'm sure most people here will know we're a venture capital fund focused on games technology, esports, digital sports, and gamified fitness. We launched our first fund 2 years ago, which closed at 115 million euros. And some people might have seen the news that we launched a SPAC, a public company this week, floated on the London Stock Exchange with the goal to partner with a European, UK games company and help them go public. If people have questions as we go along, we've only got 15 minutes. I'll start my clock. Then please ask them and I'm happy to answer them in a kind of relaxed sort of way. If you hear hoovering, I'm sorry about that as well. And I've got a few slides, but really it'll be sort of just talking about a few things for game developers, things you might want to know about raising money and perhaps venture money. So let me just share my screen. Here we go. Cool. So yes, talked about Hero and founded by Sir Ian Livingstone, who I'm sure many people here will know. So this is a slightly different take on George's graph. Some of the lines are a little bit steeper in different places. But really, the way that you might want to look at venture capital or angel investment or any sort of equity raise is that it is sort of fuel. It's sort of supercharging your idea or your team or your business. And this graph sort of demonstrates that. Firstly, venture capital isn't for everybody. Raising money isn't for everybody, and that's totally fine. There's no right way to do it or wrong way to do it. In fact, you know, for many people who want a nice lifestyle business, want to run a lifestyle business and make a lot of money, cool. Venture capital probably isn't the right way to go. And it's very, you know, Ian talks a lot about how his first businesses were bootstrapped, living in the back of a van in Hammersmith as he launched Games Workshop, and that's totally fine. But it can be hard bootstrapping a business. It takes time. And we're in a golden age of investment at the moment. Interest rates very low, lots of funds out there deploying capital, lots of fantastic angel investors out there in the UK especially, who have done very well themselves and want to send the elevator back down. So it's a great time to raise money. And you've also got, you know, slap a blockchain or NFT logo on your presentation, and you've just sort of opened yourself up to this whole new crypto market of investors, but also the blockchain networks themselves putting a lot of money into the ecosystem. So there's no better time to raise money for institutional capital. We've talked a little bit about angel investment, and that's sort of your sort of first money in the door. And you should think about institutional venture capital as that fuel to fuel your growth even further. So how can you know, it might take you 3-4 years to build up a team of 20 people working on your vision and idea. But if you take institutional money early, you can build that team much quicker. You can get products to market much quicker. You can prove out your vision. And obviously there's risks. It's called venture capital for a reason. There's risk for the investor, and there's risk for you as well. And yes, you do have to give away a percentage of a business, but the way to look at that, I think, is, what is your business? What would your business be worth in 10 years, bootstrapped or using debt? And can you raise the sort of debt, talking about, it's all very well, debt based on very conservative projections of VGTR credits or sales, but, raising 2 million, raising £1 million, or much more on just an idea and a team, difficult to do with debt. So anyway, that's the first slide. I hope that's clear. What do we look for? So any investor, when they are evaluating a business, they are trying to reduce their risk. I need to make a return on this investment, either for myself, if I'm a high net worth individual, angel investor, or for my LPs, my investor base, if I'm an institutional fund or a family office or something like that. And these are the three things that we look at as Hero Capital, but are pretty typical. The first one is a great team. That's really important. With venture, you are backing the people. As a sector specialist fund who like to think we know a lot about video games, we understand that it is a hit-driven business and it takes time to get it right. You need a good team isn't guaranteed to have a hit with every game that they bring out. Games take time to tweak, to work on, and more we're seeing live service games taking time to hone and finesse. And there's some really great examples of that, like Rainbow Six Siege is a perfect example of a game that had a train wreck of a launch and has gone on to be a esports and competitive phenomena. Same with Minecraft in a way. Look at where Minecraft was when Mojang launched it, and look at where it is now. It takes time to build that. We understand that. And you might not everything will be a hit. So when you think about venture capital, it's backing the studio, it's backing the team, it's not backing the project. That is project financing or publishing agreements. And actually, that's a really good point. I didn't mention it on the last slide, but with institutional capital at the equity studio level, you are in control of your intellectual property. You are not signing away your intellectual property like you might with a publisher. So pros and cons to every type of arrangement. And venture, like I said, isn't right for everybody. The more experienced and veteran a team is, the more a investor will be satisfied that they've been there, done it before, know what it takes to release something. And that sort of stuff goes to the amount of money raised or the valuation. A much more veteran or much more veteran team is going to command more attention, more money, bigger valuation. And that's really important. Communicating your team, your credentials, or getting that right team in place before you go out to raise money is super important as a founder. An idea is fantastic, vision is great, but how are you going to action it? Who's going to make it? Who's going to do it? And are those all the key roles filled out? The second thing that we look for is a deep moat. And with video games, that is probably intellectual property. Can you build IP that transcends just your game, that is easily recognizable, that people want to come back to again? And that for us is a moat. With a more technical business, it might be a patent, it might be the way that you're doing something, it might be the time that you've spent working on a problem. Let's say, for example, I don't know, some new technology that applies filters to people's faces in a different way. How long have you been thinking about that technology or doing it? And does that give you an advantage or a moat against competition who's coming in and trying to emulate it or copy it or coming along with more money or things like that? Another great example of a moat might be KPIs. You might be in it, you might have a Discord server that's showing 10,000 followers in it and an extra 1,000 added every month, and that's your community. It's a network effect moat. You've got a really strong community that are engaged with what you're building. Not anyone can come along and replicate that overnight. That's a moat, and it applies to game studios. And then finally, breakout opportunity. Well, boxes tick there with video games. Easily a breakout opportunity, but think about that. So I'm just checking the time. Sorry, I do rattle on a bit. Doing well, but think about that, right? So, non-sector specialist VCs or other investors are looking for buzzwords like it's got UGC, it's multiplayer, it's free to play, it's on mobile, it's cross-platform. They're trying to find the biggest TAM they can, total addressable market, with what you're building. Well, yes, that is a great way. That is a great way to be a breakout opportunity, but it's a much harder route as well. There's much more competition in that route. Can you show that you can own a specific niche, a type of game mode, or a type of IP that is undervalued at the moment or underserved to the community that's going to guarantee you a certain amount of revenue or sales? Can you take what you're building? Can it go and give that 5x, 10x return, which unfortunately a venture capitalist or an institutional investor is looking for to get the return on their investment and the return on money? So that's another reason why venture capital isn't for everybody. You could be making fantastic games with a great team, with deep IP. But if the market that you're serving is very small, institutional investors will turn a little bit away from that. Unfortunately, it's a quirk of the industry. And most importantly for us as Hero 6 specialists, great games with great gameplay, and a lot of time that can transcend these individual parts. And a great example of that is Happy Volcano, making a beautiful game called Yusaka Parking. When we met them, they had this great demo. There was going to be a single player puzzle game that was premium on PC. We talked to them, we worked with them on their vision. They raised a significant amount of capital from us, and as part of that, they're launching the game later this year. It's going to be cross-platform. It's going to be multiplayer. It's going to be it's going to have a games as a service elements to it and things like that. And so this is again another great example, going back to the graph, how a very talented studio with fantastic intellectual property and great ideas would take them 5-6 years to get to that point, but very quickly they could bring on the capital they need and the resources they need to end up higher up on the graph and to scale their business much quicker than they could otherwise. And the last thing to mention is the support that you get from having an institutional investor on your board, having someone like Ian as your chairman, having people like Luke or Cherry or myself or others, and I'm not meaning to blow, I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't want me on their board, but a lot of people might. So, that strategic help that comes with guidance, connecting you with people like Nicholas Lovell, our free-to-play venture specialist, who gets in there and works with studios to help them with their monetization plan or their engagement plan, or John Jordan, the founder of Blockchain Gamer and Pocket Gamer, who's our blockchain venture specialist, working with our portfolio companies at the moment to help them understand and navigate blockchain and Web3. So that's the other thing, that the other added benefit, which is quite unquantifiable, but some of our portfolio founders have described it as the finger on the scale, that extra support that comes from having a sector specialist institutional investor on your side, on your board, wanting your product to be a success. So I've rambled. I think that was roughly, look at that. That was good, wasn't it? That was 12 minutes. I left myself 3 for any questions. If anybody would like to ask a question, they're most welcome to.
Did you just press that button to make the beeper go? Because that's pretty impressive
It's
that you would stop.
Magic. Sam.
It's all the magic. Is that what it's all about? I have a question about Hero as a business, if that's all right. I mean, feel free to tell me to be quiet, but you've set up divisions and publicly announced a division to look after esports and a division to look after metaverse. And what's the strategy behind having those separate identities? Does that sort of reinforce about having specializations internally? Is that the motivation?
Yeah, I think, we want to help our portfolio businesses navigate the the games industry, and to create the best product. And so we've assembled what we think are some of the best team members across those disciplines. I mentioned Nicholas and John, to help them do that. And then couple that with the deep pattern recognition that comes from the partners like Ian and his experience in the business. So it's really about how can we help our portfolio companies the most to succeed and to do really, really well, and what do we need as Hero to be able to offer that.
Thank you. It was a question about what kind of businesses you look at when you went into a little bit of detail, but I know you've worked with, correct me if I'm wrong, people like Twin Suns. You mentioned Happy Volcano. You've done some stuff with Double Loop. What makes those businesses stand out from the crowd when you're talking to them? What makes them special?
That's a really good question. So Double Loop was founded by Emily Greer, who is a very seasoned games maker, and her last business, Kongregate, which was a mobile games business, exited to Modern Times Group. And this was her coming and say, right, I want to do the next thing, and I want to make this fantastic mobile game that's accessible for an audience that aren't typically gamers, and came with a PowerPoint and that team, right? Her and Shelby Molodina. Shelby, having been at WB, worked on some really fantastic mobile games there. For us, it was, she was looking for someone to back her and to work with her on that next chapter. So really, that was the team bubble. Same with Tim Longo and Twin Suns. He came to us with an excellent team and a PowerPoint saying, I've got, Forrest, I've got Jeff, I've got Haley, I've got sorry, I can't remember the names, but I've got a really great team of people who've worked on games like Skyrim, Unreal Tournament. Tim was the creative director on Halo, the last Halo, Halo 4, and said, this is the team. We want to make this amazing multiplayer cross-platform game. Do you want to back us? And we obviously said yes. And then the last thing with Happy Volcano was about, as I mentioned, the team were a little bit younger, not as veteran. And although they'd had some success before critically with their games, they hadn't, never made a live service game before, never made a cross-platform game before, or a game of this scope. But we loved the game. The gameplay was fantastic. And I ask anyone to go out and play it on Steam. It's really fun, great puzzle game. For us, it was right. How can we be flexible then to work with them to allow them to hit their vision?
That's perfect. Thank you very much for that. There's a little question I'm going to get you to answer in the text, if that's all right, from Michael about the do's and don'ts in an investor pitch deck. We'll cover that later in the panel as well. So thank you for that question. And Spike, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
As Spike moves, exit stage left, I think is the line. Edward from Harbottle and Lewis is going to join me. Edward, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks. How are you, Sam?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much. Yep, your Bluetooth is still working. Rock and roll.
Still working. Yep.
Right.
Let me see if I can.
Yeah, get those slides up. And just as a reminder to everyone, if you do have any additional questions, pop them in the Q&A. And thank you for the questions so far, which I'm channeling through, as you can tell. And after Edward has spoken, we have a panel of games companies coming up. So Edward, yes, I can see your slides. I'll hand over to you.
Great stuff. Thank you. I'm here to lower the tone a bit and focus more on what you should be worrying about rather than all the wonderful opportunities that others have been speaking about. So yes, it's the legal angle. I'm a lawyer. I'm Ed. I'm the senior associate at Harbottle and Lewis. We do a lot of work in the game sector, acting for the likes of Take-Two, all the way down to the sort of smallest startup studio and everything in between. So we sort of do it all. I'm going to try not to bore you all to tears, but really aiming to cover in this short session the different routes to finance. Others have touched on these, so I'm not going to go over what others have said. The importance of being ready for investment or financing and what you might be able to do from a sort of legal perspective, some key legal takeaways. And then at the end, I'm going to do my best impression of a tax lawyer. I'm not a tax lawyer, but I will talk a bit about SEIS and EIS. So moving onwards. as others have said, don't forget about organic growth. If you're able to bootstrap yourself and get as far down the road as you can using either just work for hire revenue or a bank loan, it may put you in a much better position when you come to negotiate, particularly on an equity investment, as others have said. Aside from bootstrapping and going it alone, the other key routes of finance are really public funding, grants, project specialist debt finance, as George and Gavin have mentioned, publishers, and equity finance. I should say that this is not a kind of complete chapter and verse on everything. It's only a 15-minute highlights. So any questions people have, I'm very happy to answer those during or afterwards. So firstly, public funding and grants. I'm not going to be able to cover, sorry, let me go back there. Everything that's out there. So some of the most interesting ones, Creative England are fantastic. They're now, I think, strictly known as Creative UK. They've just had a rebrand. They're a not-for-profit organisation that supports creative industries. They also invest in their own right, both in equity and debt. So you may see them as an investor in businesses. They also run a lot of programs. These can be, the most recent example of which is an accelerator. So there's currently a games accelerator. Applications closed already last year. But these things tend to come up from time to time. So if you're interested in those sorts of things, then I would keep an eye out on the Creative England website. The next one is UK Games Fund. And again, it's another not-for-profit government-related body. So literally last week, 2 weeks ago, 8 million quid was announced to be distributed via the UK Games Fund, specifically with the remit to support early stage games companies, whereas Creative England has slightly more of a broad remit of all creative industries. So those would just be grants. I think this most recent round, it's you can get grants of up to £25,000. So again, it's worth, before going to investors, project financiers, equity financiers, if you can apply for what is effectively free money, then it's worth doing that. Creative Scale Up is another program which has been allocated funds very recently. That's all about the infamous Levelling Up program the government is undertaking. So that's focused on sort of non-London businesses. There's also startup loans, which people often don't think about. These are kind of government run as well. And you can get up to 25 grand as a founder, and then you can get up to 100 grand if there's more than one of you. So if there's 4 of you starting a business, you could collectively borrow 100 grand. And this is aimed at really getting a business off the ground. So it's sort of businesses that have not been going for more than 2 years. But again, it's worth looking at the sources of funding, because they might just be that little bit. You're never going to get millions and millions, but they might just be that little bit you need to put a game into development, or just get a bit further on the road before you then talk to others. There's also private grants. So again, I can't go through a full list, but for instance, Epic have a scheme whereby if you're using the Unreal Engine, you can get a grant from them. So I think, stepping back, putting my lawyer's hat on, the thing to be aware of when you're looking at these grants are, firstly, what are the strings attached? So what sort of restrictions might there be on how you can use the money? What happens to any IP that you've created? Do you keep hold of this? That's a crucial question. And then thirdly, do you have to pay the grant back in any circumstances? Do you have to use the money on a particular project? It's just worth ensuring that you're aware of all of these things when you're looking at grants, and ask a friendly lawyer if you want some advice. Next, I won't touch on this because we've had chapter and verse from George and to an extent Gavin on this. So suffice it to say that VGTR and R&D tax credits are a treasure trove of value for your business. So definitely always try and remember that you should look at what you're doing and check to see if you can get those tax reliefs. And then you're aware of the various funding options. Even if you have to wait for it, you can borrow against that and get the cash now. So it's very useful for getting money in the door quickly. Project-based lending is, as has been said, financing a particular project, and the financier is paid by the revenues of the game. So publishers was traditionally the main source of finance for game studios, sort of historically. It's a key part still, but there's obviously other avenues, particularly equity finance has become much more of a thing in the video game sector. So the classic publishing deal is obviously the publisher funding the development. There'll be certain milestones. They may require IP in the game to be transferred to them. You will get an advance, and then there'll be a revenue share, and the advance will be recouped out of that revenue share. Now, they come in all shapes and sizes. That's a very, very simple example. And the key point is what sort of bargaining power the two relevant, the developer and the publisher have. It's obviously a key part of the financing of a developer, so it's important to consider. But it's sort of no longer the only option. But the key things from a legal perspective are really what's on offer. There'll be the advance, which is the cash in the door. That's very helpful. What else are they providing? Marketing, PR, distribution support, QA. What's happening to your IP? If you're in a particularly strong position and you've got an indie publisher, maybe you can hold on to your IP. What about sequels and ports, and how sort of wide does the remit of the published agreement extend? If things are not working out as you hoped, how can you get out of that relationship, and what happens to the IP, for instance, at the end of that? So really, it's just being aware of what you need to worry about, and the important thing is to always take advice. So equity finance, I think this comes in all shapes and sizes as well, and you've heard from Hero on sort of their particular angle, which is venture capital, obviously. So you might be starting a business from scratch, call some friends and family, have a whip round, and that might be what you need to get going. Hopefully you've got some well-off friends and family. Other end of the spectrum, you could be 5 years into an exponentially successful growth plan, about to launch your Series C, and you've got industry behemoths knocking on your door, begging to sort of participate. So there's a huge range of options out there, and I'll cover a few of them, but mainly focus on, again, from a legal perspective, what you need to be aware of. And going back to a point that's been made already, but it's a really important one, equity is expensive. It can be very easy at the beginning of a company's life to, rather than pay people a salary or rather than trying to go and raise money via debt or other avenues, it's very easy to say, oh, I'll give up 20% or 40%, whatever, of the company. That down the line could be a lot of value that you've given away for perhaps not very much of a contribution at that early stage. So ideally, you would delay as much as you can. Everything depends on the particular scenario, but ideally you would delay as much as you can before taking in equity, so that your business is worth as much as possible, and you can therefore give away as little of it as possible. By the same token, equity investors, generally speaking, there's all sorts of different types, but the institutions certainly will want to come in a bit later stage when there's more of a developed sort of business case, effectively. So at the earlier stages, you'll have, second point on the list, angel investors have been referred to already. These are the sort of high net worth individuals, people with some spare cash to play around with. They're probably, for games companies, they're probably interested in the industry. And so, might be a useful person to have on board, not just for the money they can provide, but also for the contacts and the expertise that they may have. Then later on is when you see sort of the institutions, so Hero Capitals and other venture capital houses, private equity houses, and then trade investors by whom I mean sort of big games companies, your Take-Twos, because they'll be more interested in a company that has potentially a successful release behind it, or a management team that has shown they can, they know what they're doing, as has been said. I think there's always a focus on what you will be asked to give up, how much equity, how many seats on the board, what consent rights will there be over the day-to-day running of the business. Early stage investors, like angel investors, will probably ask for less. Crowdfunding rounds, to cover that off, that they may ask for very little, because each individual investor is not investing enough to almost have the bargaining power to request their own board seat. So it really depends, but I think generally speaking, the rule is that earlier stage investors, you're giving away your company's equity at a lower value. That's the risk they're taking. They'll benefit later on if the company goes well. Later on, when institutions get involved, is when you'll be asked for more consent rights and perhaps more of an oversight over how you're running the business. I mean, the key distinction between financial investors and trade investors and what they'll ask for, Hero is actually probably an exception that proves the rule, because they know a lot about the sector. You might have venture capital firms, private equity firms, who are just interested in getting exposure to the game sector, and so they may not have much to offer. Hero Capital will. Hero Capital also know about the business, so they perhaps will want to be part of those conversations. So, as I say, every investor is different, and the relationship you will have with them is different. So it's important when you're thinking about investment to think about what you are expecting from the relationship. I think trade investors, goes without saying, they know the trade, so you can expect them to be much more interested, as a rule, in how you're running the business operationally. Flipping that round, not only what should you be thinking about giving up, but what else beyond the money are investors providing? So an angel investor might be able to open doors for you. Venture capital firm might know the sector very well and be able to put you in touch with somebody who could really help improve this particular bit of your business. So it's important to always look beyond the money and see what else is being provided. And if you've got a choice between investors, that could be a really important way to choose. It's really about alignment in the end. Any investor is a partner, any financier is a partner, and you need to balance the kind of competing demands and what you expect from the relationship. I would say, it's never too early to start speaking to people who may become financiers or investors in your business. These deals can take months to put together, but actually it may have been years since that first coffee. Perhaps one of these hub crawl sessions in physical form, when they come round, you might meet someone that 5 years later ends up investing in your business. So it's always important to try and keep an open mind when you're meeting people, and try and meet as many people as you can. So really, just conscious of time. So the importance of being ready, this in a way goes without saying. And I think the key point is that when you get to an investment process, everyone's very focused on doing things very quickly, which is right. Therefore, what you need to do really is, before you've even got there, make sure that from a legal perspective, your business works and makes sense. So, that might be a business plan. Depending on what form of finance you're going for, that will be more or less important. However, I would always say, please have a business plan, if only to make sure you know what you're supposed to be doing. But for a proper investment, I would say that you need to have a business plan that you've worked on with your accountant in detail, which has good financial projections, not least because as part of the investment, you will have to give a series of warranties, i.e. promises, about certain aspects of the business, one of which is probably going to be the financial projections in the business plan were prepared, with reasonable care, or some similar wording. So if you haven't got that business plan right, then you may be on the hook financially if something sort of goes wrong and the performance and the business plan sort of divert. Get your docs as well as your ducks in a row. This is just ensuring that where are your contracts? Are your contracts uploaded to a database online, to a Dropbox, whatever it is, or are they sort of languishing unsigned in a cupboard somewhere? Do you have contracts with your employees? Most importantly, for video games businesses, do you have contracts in place with anyone external who is developing a part of the game that you're working on or what have you? Because from an intellectual property perspective, unless you have a contract that says anything produced is owned by the company, it will be owned by the person that created it. So IP is obviously the most important thing with video games businesses and interactive entertainment businesses. So that's crucial. Important also to have proper employment contracts with people, because when you get investment in and people decide they maybe don't like the new world, you might get a person leaving. Do they have restricted covenants in their contract, ensuring that they can't then set up a competing business the next day or start soliciting clients? So it's sort of boring but important stuff that as lawyers we hope you're doing anyway, but especially in view of an investment coming up, it's very, very important to ensure that you're up to speed with things. Companies house filings, things like that, things that are obviously quite rightly quite far down your daily to-do list, but are very important. So key legal takeaways. I would say a term sheet, irrespective of what type of financing you're seeking, it's very, very, very important to have a term sheet up front that sets out all of the key terms. The worst thing you can do is sort of vaguely agree on a handshake, yes, great, could you invest in my company? And then a few weeks later, you get a 100-page document, which kind of makes no sense. It's a big waste of time for everyone, because you will have to ask someone like me to look through it, and it may not reflect what you thought the deal was. So it's very important to say, no, we need to have a term sheet, and you need to get a lawyer to look at it, because a lot of times what you agree in the term sheet, although it will mostly be non-binding, it will be very hard to step away from what's in there. And I spend almost every deal that I do trying to row back on points that were agreed in the term sheet without a lawyer having looked at it. So it's really, really important to always insist. This is particularly relevant for equity investments, I suppose. Really important to have a term sheet at the start, so that if you realize that you're fundamentally incompatible, you know that at the start, you haven't wasted time and money. Secondly, what strings are attached? This applies across the board. Always read the small print is another way of saying it, really. Great money's coming in through the door. What does that mean for your business? Particularly on the next point, what's happening to your IP? Are you transferring it to the investor, the publisher, whoever, or are you keeping it? It's very, very important as a video games business to hold on to your IP very, very jealously. Look beyond the money. As I've said before, investors should not be seen as merely checkbooks. They can offer so much more. And when you're choosing to go with a particular investor or financier, it's crucial that you consider that and ask the right questions. Do your diligence on them. Finally, be organized. Are you investment ready? What can you do to be prepared? Have you got the right advisors in place? Are your accountants, do they have experience with doing investment deals? Maybe consider a corporate finance advisor. These are people who sort of work with other advisors. They sort of try and ensure that the deal is on track, and they will help you with preparing the numbers for the deal. They will also go into bat for you, negotiate on your behalf. They obviously cost extra money and are an extra advisor on any deal, but they often pay for themselves because they might spot something that adds real value to you. They'll also potentially be able to bring more investors to the table. Many recent examples where there's been a bilateral discussion between a company and an investor, and the investor has known that there are other people waiting in the wings because the corporate finance advisor has, looked in their little black book and got loads of other people interested. There's competitive tension, so the company's done very well out of it. So EIS and SEIS, I didn't set a timer, unlike Spike, so I'm not sure how much time I have, but I will just quickly say that they are brilliant because they give incredible tax relief to your investors. When I say investors, I'm not talking about Places like Hero Capital, not about institutions, but individuals can benefit from EIS and SEIS, although there's a way for individuals to invest via funds. So people like Calculus Capital, who are very active in the creative space. The rules are very complex. The main thing is just to be aware of, here are the key benefits, huge tax relief for investors. So if you can be an EIS or SEIS company and qualify, it's incredibly attractive, particularly on earlier stage investment rounds like angel investment rounds, because those are the people who can kind of benefit from the tax relief. So the key conditions are things like you have to not have a certain amount of assets, and it's aimed at helping early stage companies. So if you've grown beyond the threshold set out in the legislation, then you can't benefit. There has to be a long-term growth and development objective. So if you've set up a company to develop one game, you're unlikely to benefit. But if you are a company that's making loads of titles, that's great. You'll probably fall within the legislation. You have to be UK based. You have to not do certain excluded activities. And also investors can't be sort of employees or connected to the company in certain ways. They can't have more than 30% of the shares of the company. So that's me. I've probably gone over. Apologies if I have. And happy to answer any questions. And thank you very much for listening.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ed. I mean, this is where the applause would come in. Quite difficult on these webinar style things, but
I'll just
really good.
The applause.
Yeah, just take the applause. Really good. Thank you very much for that. I mean, we're a little bit behind schedule, but just a quick question for you. In fact, there's one in the Q&A chat that I'm going to get you to answer afterwards, which is asking about when companies set up, how do they deal with some of those basic legal aspects? I mean, yeah. I'm assuming it's talk to Ed, who'll give you a little bit of free consultation to get you warmed up. I mean, it might be that. It might be look at the UK contracts that you've written for us. You've written some standard contracts.
You've answered, I will basically just write down what you said.
I'm a bit like that. I'm so sorry.
No, it's great.
The question for you though is, I mean, lots of deals, lots of paperwork comes in front of you where certain deals are being put together. Where's the wind blowing? What's the trend that you've seen in the last sort of 12 to 18 months in terms of the kinds of deals that are coming through? Is there a lot more publishers, a lot more equity? What's going on in particular?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I mean, as a corporate lawyer, I see less of the publishing work because we have a team that does publishing work. But I think it's clear that as an industry, it's just about the hottest it's ever been. And as a result, you've got all sorts of people flooding in, particularly more private equity money. But also you can see, I mean, it's been a crazy year, and it's only February for big M&A in the games industry. So not only are more people outside the industry, like private equity firms, becoming interested in it, but also the big behemoths, as I call them, are consolidating and mopping up companies left, right, and center. So, I think in terms of a trend, it's just that people see, not only has the pandemic obviously made it a much more valuable industry and people engage with gaming in a way they haven't before, but it's clear that has changed. It's changed the way people interact. Look at us, here we are having a perfectly brilliant conversation remotely, and buzzwords like the metaverse will work out what those mean in short order. But gaming is kind of the link with all of that stuff. And so I think the kind of rise of equity finance being interested in games is kind of the biggest story of the last few years. So I'd say that publishing hasn't been supplanted. It's basically a part of a broader universe. But you could start a gaming company and then in 2, 3, 5 years IPO it on the stock market, which I think is something that people wouldn't have expected a few years ago.
Some really positive words there. Thank you very much, Edward, for your time today. I'm going to leave you to answer those questions in the chat for me, and I'm going to invite our games panelists to come forward. Now, I don't know what they're going to say. We've heard quite a lot of positives. The golden age for investment, we heard. More investment so far this year than we've seen historically from, in fact, more M&A this year alone, and we're only in February for the whole of last year. So some incredible changes and incredible things going on there. Let's see if it's quite so rosy when we talk to some of our studios here today. I'm going to just go through the 4 panelists and get them all to do a little 2-minute hello, and perhaps, who are you, what company do you represent, and maybe how your business is funded, just so we kind of know who we're talking to. Barry, I'm going to come to you first because you're first on my screen. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, good, Sam. Yeah, welcome.
I haven't spoken to you in a while. Lovely to catch up with you. I'll put you up first, if that's all right. Give us the
Sounds
2 or 3
good.
minutes about you, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely fine. I just want to say, just enjoyed the last hour listening to everyone. I think the last 3 years of my life had just flashed before me. I'm CEO of Bad Fox Studios. We're a startup. We're about 3 years old now. We're totally new to the arena. We created employment, and I have a wonderful team. We're produced Super Squad, which is sitting on Steam and Epic live service game. We're doing really nicely at the moment, and I'm sure as we sort of go forward, there's lots I want to say. We just don't know how much time we've got left, which will be quite interesting. But yeah, I'll hand over so the others can introduce who they are. All
right, Matt, over to you then. Hello.
Hi, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name's Matt. I'm the development director at Equinox Studios. Personally, I've been passionate about games and play since I was a kid, which was topped off when I was age 14, took a psychometric test, and the top answer was toy designer. I'd never really realised that there was people behind things like Monopoly, Horace Goes Skiing on my Spectrum, or Sonic. So it was a bit of a revelation when it came to me. So I think it's been written in the stars that I've worked around toys and games and play ever since. The studio, we're based up in Manchester. We're a co-development and porting studio at the moment. We work with people all over the world, delivering projects, features, initiatives for their games. And we also push the boundaries of the technology. We're doing things that people have never seen before in AAA. We are a kind of bootstrap studio, really. We're founded by a father and son team, and what we make goes back into our own pot, and we try and develop our own IP as well, which we're early doors on, but the team's growing. So yeah, I'll hand over to the next person.
Yeah, we're going to go to Jay next. Thank you very much for that, Matt. Jay, hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Yuki board member, thank you for joining us here today.
No, it's all right. Thank you so much for inviting me. No, it's been really, really cool listening to everything, so I've been taking notes. But just as in terms of an intro, I'm a game developer, business owner, and educator. I'm a co-founder director of an indie game studio called Arrogant Pixel. We're best known for releasing a pixel art point and click adventure series called The Tale of Doris and the Dragon. So currently I'm a course leader and senior lecturer on the games design and animation course at UWL, but I'm actually running the company sort of in the background, and I've got a wonderful team that's sort of taking the reins on the production side. So I'm doing a lot of the biz dev stuff, really. Right now, we're working on a few projects. We've got one physical game that we're looking at pitching at the moment, and we're also looking at, we're on the pitching circuit for a digital game as well, which is sort of multiplayer games of service, you name it. So, yeah, that's me.
On the pitching circuit. All right, I'll come back and ask you about that in a second. Dave, hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm very good, thank you. Thanks very much for having us on the panel. So I'm the CEO of an indie game studio called Dream Reality Interactive. We've been around for about 5 years. We took seed funding to get the business started, and then we've also done a couple of rounds of that, and then some debt funding as well. And we also do co-development, which we do for 2 reasons. One, because it is different to equity funding and it helps us fund our own IP, but also we focus really on areas that we're quite excited about. So at the moment we have one live project that's our own IP, which is a mobile game, merge game, which has got some quite unique aspects to it. And then we have 2 co-development projects, both of which are in the metaverse. So one is based on art NFTs from a group called Frogland.io, or Notorious Frogs, which are very interesting, and we're building a really cool system world for frog owners or hodlers. And the other is as yet not fully announced, but it's basically a sports themed metaverse with some very exciting celebrity sports people involved as well. And we find this sort of blend very interesting because we can learn new technologies, new ways of funding and developing games, but also it also funds our own IP development.
You've thrown some real. Thank you for that introduction. We've heard.
I'm also advisor and chair of a few companies as well, so I do help out other studios, which means I've been involved in a number of equity raises and debt finance deals over the past few years.
Well, Dave, you mentioned metaverse. You've mentioned sports celebrities. You're throwing everything at this. Let's talk about that sort of relationship with investors then and platforms when you go talk to them. What's the kind of, from your experience, what's the kind of language they want to hear? What are the things that get them excited?
So certainly seed, pre-seed or very early stage investment, it's really about the team. You need a good idea, but the team dictates whether you can execute that idea, right? So, somebody with a good idea but no team or no experience, or somebody with a great team but no good idea, neither of those are going to work. You kind of want both of those things. When you get later stage, it's really about metrics and understanding the sales pipeline potential. So whether that's in mobile or PC or console now, it seems much more about what kind of sales you can get and what kind of audience you can reach and how engaged that audience are. And I do find there's a little bit of a gap at the moment, because that exciting bit when you haven't made anything, everybody's all excited about. And the bit when you've finally got it all working, you've found your audience and everybody's, you've got to spend if you scale up. That's great. But the bit in the middle is a bit of a challenge, because once you're up and running, actually, it's quite easy for people to kind of just keep an eye on you. And I think there's a risk for indies to focus too much on that opportunity. Whereas what they could be doing is really focusing on their game and looking at deals to give themselves the longest possible chance to make sure they get the best metrics and the best game ready. Rather than, I've spent quite a bit of time talking to people, and it's great to get to know them, but you feel like you're in a bit of a holding pattern. And I think right now there's a bit of a gap in the equity market between those two.
I was going to say, Sam.
Chime in, Barry, by the sound of it. Yeah.
No, I was going to say it's quite interesting, because I think we've heard today about the team quite often, and our experience when we've been out to fundraising with a prototype game, which is on Crossplay, Steam and Epic. The first question you get as an indie is, what is your team and what are your metrics and data? I always found that very strange, because when the product is built, I would have thought that was the most important thing as a creative. It's the actual finished item. And if your team's already built that, it's slightly irrelevant whether that team is AAA or not, but it seems very key. And I can understand from Spike's comment earlier, they're most probably not interested in the team. They're actually selling the team name to the investor that's actually loaning the money in. So that's the safe bet. But sometimes we are represented in a creative industry, and creatives can come straight from school. They can come after 30 years. They can come from all sorts. That's very difficult within fundraising at the moment, because we have been told quite often, go and get yourself a couple of ex AAAs, put them on the board and you're away. We've never done that, because we're true to our roots and we believe our product will stand for what our product is. And I think you've got this problem within the UK, that the creative industry speaks to indies, but it speaks at a level where you're almost a seed A, seed B round. I mean, even if we go back to Edward's point, if you said, for example, the government, Creative England, give you 25, 30K, that's fine. I know from running a business that if I had an accountant, a commercial advisor, a lawyer, I can burn 50 to 100K to get some documents in the cupboard. It doesn't quite sort of mash, if that makes it doesn't meld, So I think we have to sometimes come back to reality and understand there's a lot of indies that love the creative industry, are producing an enormous amount of great concepts and games. And sometimes the challenge is, how can we focus less money across all of them rather than lots of money on named teams that may or may not succeed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, looking at the way that the team is viewed and where the focus points are. Jay, you've been you reference you've been out doing the publisher tour at the moment. How are you finding that? And are you at a disadvantage because you don't have those names on the board you can throw that have got that experience? Is that something you're experiencing?
I think so. It's just the whole point of me founding this company in the first place is that none of us had industry experience. We were definitely coming from like a hobbyist background initially, and we kept it as like a side gig. You know, we all had day jobs, we were outsourcing, so we never really had to depend on there being like a, you know, AAA name or ex studio person sort of in the business. But now that we are searching for funding, that's becoming a little bit of a barrier, I think. So I look to examples like other places in the world that might, I think it's Germany or something, that put like 25k to put together like a games design document, or like will match fund maybe 30 to 50% of your you know, prototype or something like that. There's a little bit of a gap in funding, like as you were saying, Barry, like 25k seems like a little bit, you know, if you're a proper company, you know, VAT registered and you're, you know, paying staff and things like that, you can burn through that, you know, so quickly. So there's like a weird, there's a gap between like a very, very small amount of money and then obviously the millions that are being invested. There's like this middle ground that I feel like is lacking a little bit, but I don't know, maybe we can work towards something like that in the future. That would be great. But maybe that's where some of the debt financing, some of the equity, early stage, that sort of thing. But it's a massive gap in knowledge for me personally. It's something that maybe if we had somebody a little bit more experienced in the company, that I'd be feeling a little less worried about. But since I'm the one heading it up, that is like a big gap. So that's why I'm here, trying to learn.
It's a really good point about those big steps. You know, we've heard a lot of different routes to finance today, and it is hard to distinguish between them and know which is suitable for each business. It's not an easy thing. Matt, you do something slightly different in that you're going out and pitching for work for hire from people. As well as developing your own tech and other things as well, I'm sure. How's that market at the moment, and how does that work for you as a business?
Yeah, so I think opposed to perhaps what Jay's facing, we're seeped in AAA experience in this company. So I'm not sure we know how to do indie. That would be really difficult actually for people to actually, you know, to work at that speed, intensity that an indie requires. So in terms of building the business, we've grown quite a lot in the last 18 months. We work alongside other studios as a co-developer. So therefore, and there is a lot of opportunity out there for that sort of work. We have meetings every other day with studios all over the world with, you know, with our, you know, to bring on our engineering services. I think what makes us a bit different is that we aren't work for hire. Work for hire is no good to us. If you want to come along and ask us if we've got a guy for 3 months, we haven't. All our guys are on very long-term contracts, which obviously gives us a little bit of security in terms of perhaps what money we could invest in our own IP and our own technology. So we have a kind of budget for that, which is, you know, nice to have. But of course, like I say, AAA is really where we're at, and therefore, if our IP is going to go anywhere, it's going to take a big lump of money to kind of, or a big lump of rocket fuel to get it off the ground. We realise that, but we're ambitious. You know, I think Gavin or Spike mentioned a lifestyle business. This really isn't a lifestyle business. This is going to be a performance business, and that's what our aim over the next year, to become that performance business with, you know, 50 plus people in it, where, you know, you start forgetting people's names of partners and things. But with a slight swing on it, that, you know, actually we started by a father and son team. Father, Sumo Digital veteran, worked at Gremlin, God knows, you know, loads of other beautiful studios from the past, and we've got real kind of pedigree. So actually, yeah, the pitching circuit is something I'll probably be jumping on at some point in the next 6 months, I hope. So I'll probably be, I think it's, I'm preparing everybody for lots of no's, because I know that will come. Pitching is hard, man. Pitching to investors, pitching to, it's a hard business, and you've got to have a thick skin, and you've got to be prepared to take a lot of no's. I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
I totally agree there, because one of the other things, I mean, it was listening to George earlier about factoring, and totally understand, and we've been down that road. But again, it depends on, could you say, the luck of the dice, the draw. Edward said earlier that have a good accountant, have good lawyers, get it all ducks in a row. We have an experience where we felt we had that. But because of certain issues, which we won't necessarily go into, we can have an inspection by HMRC, which they have every right to do. That can take 6 to 12 months. Now, if you're into an indie situation where your IP is assigned, you're into that, you're looking at in and out within 6 months, and then suddenly, bang, that goes 18 months, you've got to fund that somehow. Otherwise, you've lost your IP. So there are amazing uses for VGTR and R&T tax credits. I get that. And when you're selling that, or you're a lawyer, or you're an accountant, these are very good products. But as an indie running a company day to day, trust me, it can be damned hard. And if you make a wrong decision outside, or somebody affects that, you've got to be able to get up every morning, come into work, face those bills, not know how you're paying them day after day after day. And then when you go to pitch, it's where's your metrics? And we all know you need the money to fuel the fire to do the publishing. So it really is an ever circulating game, but we love it, and we're doing it. And that's why we're doing it, because we love it. It's not about the money. It's not about the 10 times multiple exit. It's not about the equity. It's we're gamers, and we love making games.
And we keep being told that we're in the golden age here of investment, that it's never been easier to get investment. Dave, is that true? Do you think we're lucky at the moment? And
I think there's a big shake-up, actually. I mean,
yeah.
Yes, if you look at the fact that NFTs and cryptocurrency are now effectively entering the market of games in some form or other, that's adding quite a lot of money into the pot that's already there. I do think there's the metrics question, which I've raised and a few people have echoed, is I think we've got to a point where institutional investors, it is a bit of a game, and it's kind of easy to sort of sit and wait for the right metrics. And I do think that gap that we've all talked about is the hard bit. But actually, and I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but the NFT and crypto is coming into that gap. And it may be that some of the institutions may have to change their tactics a little bit in terms of strategy, in terms of how they invest. Because the other thing I think that's happened is, when you get to good metrics, you don't necessarily need to take the money you need to fuel the growth through equity. You can actually, because you've got metrics, you can actually then do it through debt. So once you can prove out your LTV, and your acquisition cost, then that scale you can do through debt rather than through equity. So I think there's a couple of things coming that will change a little bit how the market works at the moment.
I think it's also a question, because we're a very strong financial country. We always have been, and I get it. And if I was an investor, and I'm sitting in an investor's chair, I get it. I'm not sitting here saying it's all wrong. Trust me. But I think the issue we have is, like, if I went to the bank and I've got £10 million in asset, cars, houses, estates, and I want to borrow £2 million to buy a villa and rent it out, it's not a problem. If I have the same dream, same contacts, and I want to borrow £2 million to buy it and rent it out, it's a massive problem. So you normally can find money when you don't need it. Now, if we take that into the creative, industry, it's very similar. It's show me a AAA team, show me the metrics, and I'll give you some money. And the case is, I don't need it then, because I've got a AAA team and I've got all the money coming in. Thanks, but if you've got a really good idea, So where I was coming from, rather than the 25K or the 9 million, 10 million, 15 million rounds, there should be more. Maybe you can lead the way here, where there is a money pool where, say, like 200, 300 is given to support companies over a year to see where they can get to, and a reality check after 12 months on a KPI, and more shared wealth. So investors, if you like, cross-spread some of their money. They can still have money over in the big boys, but cross-spread across an industry where more people can jump on that drawdown of funds to run a team for 12 months to demonstrate what they're doing.
Oh, I saw a tweet the other day that was sort of similar to that. It was just sort of like, dear, AAA investors or something, if you've got £1 billion to spend on 2 attempts at a AAA
Absolutely.
game, then fund 1,000 mid-level indie games instead. Like, they're gonna get a few hits. Yeah. What you'll find a few hits. It just feels like maybe that's not spread across, and obviously people want to fund a surefire thing. I totally appreciate that. So I mean, on the pitching circuit, what we're finding is the people that we're closest with, I would say, they kind of share the same vision as us. They really want to get involved. They really are passionate about live ops, games as a service, and want to get involved like in the nitty gritty in the games design and ask really challenging and interesting questions. And those are the sorts of people that we gravitate to, and they aren't offering the most amount of money to us, but in terms of value as an investor, it just seems like we're going to be like the biggest fish in their pond, if that makes sense, rather than being the tiniest fish, with a bigger publisher or with like a bigger investment, group. So I guess the value for us as an indie company, when looking for publishers, is genuinely, are these people that we can basically call team members, I guess. So that's
don't you, sorry, Dave, don't you think though, Jay, that the answers in the question, for example, if I look at publishers and investors, and won't name any, we will drop your pitch deck on my website. Have you got a pitch deck? Send it, email, or look at the team. Do you not think the first thing they would ever say is, oh, you got a game on Steam, we'll play it and then get in touch with you? The game is less important than the pitch deck. And to me, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's interesting because like we've already released a couple of games, and the one that we are pitching at the moment is completely different. So it wouldn't matter, if they played any of our previous games or not. But yes, the demo is really important. Getting to that vertical slice is really important. That's what we've been talking and moaning about, right? It's just sort of like, well, we need to get to this prototype stage, and which costs money to get the publishing fund. So that's the kind of weird sort of like I don't know, hamster wheel we find ourselves on each and every time.
Yeah, that to me is the reality of being a creative, though. I actually love that push, and as I say, from my team, they've gone to hell and back over the last 3 years, and I love them all dearly. But the point I'm making is that I think there's a space that Ukie can challenge, because as an investor, you want your money back. Of course, no one's here for free handout to make my lifestyle easy. I want to run a company, you need to pay it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is, if I was investing 50 million as a house, put 25 million in the AAA teams that you really think are good, the other 25 million, do 500,000 across many companies and support that industry, and KPI them, that as one ticks through on metrics, then you can grab it. That's really where I'm pitching. It's just a different way of thinking, because the money's there and the will is there and the kindness from the investors is there. And of course they want their money back, but it's how can we change the way we're thinking about connecting and cross-investing? And somebody like Ukie could oversee maybe 500 UK studios where there is a cross-investment, there's support, there's help, there's publishing, there's engagement, there's cross-pollination, everything, and really push that industry forward, and ask the big boys to donate just 1% of what they normally fund. That could be funded.
That sounds like, let's put it on the agenda for the next board meeting, Jay. Let
me write that down real quickly.
See what happens. If we're talking about a slight change of tack, we're going to get a couple of quick questions in, if that's all right. So probably won't come to all of you, but we'll take it in turns. We've seen a lot of overseas mergers and investment and activity in the UK Is that a good thing for the UK, do you think? Matt, do you want to have a first stab at that one?
Yeah, I suppose looking back over the years, the UK has been a very investable country to across different industries. Maybe there is a concern that there could be some overinvestment. Certainly, a lot of the car industry has disappeared from this country now, and has gone to different areas of the world. It's unlikely that would happen, because I think it's not about the technology and the factory workers anymore, but it's about the developers over in this country. We have an incredible history around the gaming industry, and I think that probably puts us in good stead. But there are a lot of massive conglomerates that have now pieces of the UK games industry. I think it's about, if I was the UK government, perhaps I'd be looking to claw some of that back. And in fact, I think to Barry's point, this kind of indie industry, this is just perfect breeding ground for the UK to lead in that area, to have great young companies leading the world. There's no reason why we shouldn't be. But the UK government needs to step in and make sure that it stays UK, I think.
So we take it as a compliment, but perhaps just need to make sure that we're protecting the UK. Does that resonate with you, Dave? Does that make sense?
I've been a party to a number of different investments from abroad and UK. It's interesting because one of the challenges that the big Chinese companies face is they can't invest in America at the moment. So I think that's increased their investment profile in Europe, particularly, and the UK obviously is a big centre in Europe for games. Is it a bad thing? It's difficult. I think that that's an advantage to us in a way, because it means that those UK developers are probably getting overexposure in Asia compared to the US companies. So that's giving us an advantage in a massive market. But yeah, obviously, it probably for the UK it would be good if it was more UK based overall, because we're such a global market, and that's happening more and more and more, and more games are going into Asia, and it becomes part of the standard roadmap rather than exception. It is kind of difficult to work out. I can't actually work out which outcome would be better, if you see what I mean. Yeah. Having an advantage in a huge place like Asia versus owning everything in the UK. Yeah. I found that those investors from outside the UK have been pretty good and are generally strategic as well. So that my experience of that has been pretty positive on the day-to-day or month-to-month running of businesses. So, I'm probably on the fence on it a little bit, to be honest.
I was going to ask a question about innovation in funding. We might park that one. That might be something we get to at next week's event, actually, when we talk about NFT and blockchain, which I'm not going to reference now because it's already been mentioned a couple of times. Let's leave that to next week. I was also going to ask a question as to whether it's cool to be an indie. You might want to answer that when you give me your final answer as well. It's a question I asked on the Hub Crawl 3 years ago. It was so fashionable to be an indie, and it was driving investment and driving activity. I'd be interested to hear if you still think that's the case. But let's end with final thoughts on the key things you have to do to get your business ready. So we think about practical guidance for the audience here. Dave, I'm going to stick with you if that's all right. What are the absolute musts that businesses should do to get those investors interested?
Definitely getting your pitch right, making sure you've got the right things in your pitch deck. So just an idea isn't enough. You do need to have some solid production in there. It doesn't need to be super detailed, but it does need to be there. We think it's going to take us 18 months, and we think the team size is going to peak at 12, but average out at 8. Those sorts of things. Some sort of costs like that. Some understanding of the audience. Make sure that you explain what the second-to-second gameplay is and the minute-to-minute gameplay. So I think all those things, and you don't need to have exactly the team or whatever, but I do think, as we've talked about, talent does sell in some way. So if you've got some people with experience, then do use that to your advantage. And it's not just about the idea. An idea, unfortunately, I think, but you do need to back it up with execution. Ultimately, we can all sit and drink coffee or beer if you want to, and talk about the best film, game, book you could write or whatever. But most of the time, it's actually about the execution. Is it really fun? Do you find an audience? You might make a really fun game, but only 2 people want to play it, or you might make a not that fun game, but millions of people want to play it. And so, there's sort of different commercial results to that. Run your pitch past a few friendly faces. If you do know a VC or a high net worth investor, then who's a bit more friendly, run it past them and get some feedback. And if you don't, then just find some other people, other people who've pitched, and battle test it a little bit first.
Yeah, that's really good guidance. That battle testing is so important.
You don't need to go on too long. You want to leave them wanting more.
Talking of wanting more, Matt, you're getting ready you suggested you might be going out there looking for investment soon and doing some pitching. How's the deck coming on? What are the gaps in it? What are the things that you're going to lead with when you go out and pitch your business?
So, I suppose just going back a step, I would say get prolific on getting ideas, get prolific on your process for getting ideas and getting fun ideas out there. Get them written down in some way, because an idea without being written down is just air. So get prolific on that. Make sure you're getting a lot of eyeballs on the idea. Whoever you've got, your people you trust, your team. Get a lot of opinion as much as you can, and then get real on the numbers. You have to get real on all areas of the numbers. So how much is it going to cost? Don't scrimp. Don't say it's going to cost me, 10 grand to make this game and it's going to cost you 100 or 1 million or 1 billion. Get real. What gets measured gets done, in my opinion. So when I'm putting down a schedule or I'm putting a budget together, this is what I'm working at and this is what it's going to get done. So in my mind, getting real on your numbers is the absolute for me. That's if I can go in being confident on that. Look, if they don't like the game, don't like the game. If they've got a game like that in their suite already, odds are they're not going to want another one. So the idea being that actually once you've got a solid deck full of good information and good intel about how you're going to make it happen, the implementation, then you've got a chance, I think. I hope.
And it sounds like targeting your investors as well, really understanding their perspective as well.
Yep.
Barry, does that resonate with you? And then we're going to finish with a comment from Jay, if that's all right. But Barry, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from a creative indie point of view, it is very key and important that you understand what investors are doing and all the metrics and the legalese. I think the key is, though, believe in your team and believe in what you're doing. And don't lose sight of having fun in the process of creating something cool, because as soon as you lose the love of what you're creating, it's not going to be cool. And that has got to be the important thing. If you believe you're going to be there and your process is around the creative IP, the rest will come, and you just have to have that belief. It's damned hard, but if you have that belief, it will come. And at some point you'll get over the line, and that's what you've got to believe in. But how long that line is before you get there, it's a long time. It could be short, it could be long. But if you have the belief and you have the fun, but don't take your eyes off the process of having fun and creative, because that's what we should be doing.
Excellent. Jay, last word for you, if that's all right. I mean, you could always take the our indies cool still if you want to. I mean, obviously you're cool and your company's cool, but or you can tell us about sort of, the last thoughts on funding for success. What's the essence of that?
Yeah, well, funding for success, maybe just planning for successful failure. I think it's probably the best way that I really think about my company is just, I have a really longitudinal view about the business. It's just like, are we going to be alive in 5 years' time? Probably. I can say that confidently today. Just if we keep ticking along, then it should be fine. If we get funding, then great, and it will speed things up. But if you've built your company so that you're, able to pay your artists, you're able to stay afloat, you can pay your rent, then you're doing okay. You're doing better than most. There's a lot of like startup statistics that, say, that companies fold after a year or two. And as long as you're not part of that statistic, then you're doing better. You are, like, honestly, and you'll just learn along the way. And I had a conversation with Creative England, I think, about this little leaflet, and we were discussing the idea that well, this is my third business, you know, and the other two that I had run, you know, I learned a lot from, you know, it's, you've got to have like a certain level of like emotional maturity, financial maturity to be able to sort of bring this through. And you might not be ready if this is your first business. So just do things badly, just do anything badly, fail, start again. That's just my philosophy when it comes to doing this. And now that I've got Arrogant Pixel, it's something that is the best thing that I've ever created. It's something that I really don't want to let go. So I'll do anything in my power to keep it going, like whether it's, you know, funding it myself or through partners. But, you know, you just have to be a little bit philosophical about it, I think.
Yeah, the next business you run will always be better.
Yeah.
That sounds
exactly.
good. But make the current one work.
Yes, obviously. We try to do that, of course.
Listen, I'm going to bring it to a close, and it's been, we've gone well over time, but I was enjoying myself. So I thought, let's just keep going. And really insightful panelists there. So thank you very much for all of your guidance here today. In fact, I want to thank all of our speakers, Gavin, George, Spike, and Edward. Also, Dave, Barry, Matt, and Jay. Thank you very much for giving up your time and supporting us today. The video content will be out soon, so everyone can remind themselves of those pearls of wisdom that you shared with everyone today. So thank you very much for that. But most of all, thank you to our audience for coming along today, and hope to see you next week at the next Hub Crawl, same time, different link. You'll have to go find the link and I'll send it out to people. Amazing. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Guys.
Bye.
Bye.